There we go. We are now recording, which is wonderful. If you don't want to be featured in the recording, I suggest you mute yourself and you turn your video off. We're not sharing the recording far and wide, but it will be on our website for our members to view at a later date. During the presentation, if we could just make sure we're all muted, and then we can hear from our wonderful Glenn about the Wetland project. Yes, sorry, I've lost my track of thought. Too many screens going on. So yes, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Glenn to talk about the Wetland project. Over to you, Glenn.
Thanks, Sophie, and good morning, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well. It's nice to see quite a lot of my river fly and river search volunteers in the room. It's been a little while since we've all been out together, so hopefully this will sort of keep your wetlands interest peaked. I'll just share my screen now. Okay, so for many of you, you'll be very familiar with a lot of the topic which I'll be talking about today. But really, what I want to do is kind of do a quick look back at some of the works that we've delivered across Surrey over the last 7 years. But I'd also like to look at why are we delivering this work across Surrey? Some of the issues that we're seeing across our rivers, which are particularly in the public consciousness now, and I would also like to really look at how I see us moving forward as a wildlife trust with all of you guys as our volunteers as well. So Surrey does have some cracking stretches of river, and we've got about 6 or 7 river catchments that actually come in or out of the county. The main couple of river catchments that we look at are the River Wey, which has its source in Alton, has a source in Hazelmere, and it flows up all the way through Godalming, Guildford, Woking, and it meets the Thames at Weybridge. This is actually a shot of this southern way at Tilford, and you can see that's kind of what we're looking for in a river, lovely amounts of vegetation there that'll all be full of life. So we are quite lucky. We are quite a wet county in that sense. So what makes a river healthy? So what are we actually looking for in a healthy river? Well, there's a number of different things. A natural river will meander across its floodplain. You'll have things like the marginal vegetation along the sides of the channel, good amounts of aquatic vegetation in stream. And this is all really important for invertebrates that will be living in there. They'll be feeding on that, they'll be feeding on the algae. And we also look for good clean gravels. I mean, these gravels are really where it all goes on. This is where a lot of our river flies, such as mayflies and the caddisflies, will be living. They're the spawning areas for migratory fish species such as trout, and they'll be feeding on those river flies as well. And so it really does help the base of the food chain if we can keep those gravels in good condition, well oxygenated, cleaner sediment as well. And here's some of the usual suspects that many of you will recognise that we actually monitor for. I'll talk about that a little bit more. And these are really sort of the building blocks of the river. This is what kickstarts everything. And it's not just about what goes on in the river as well. It's also about what's going on around the river in the catchments as well. A healthy catchment will have a lot of wetlands. It'll be able to not only store water in these wetlands, but sequester carbon as well in those wetlands. And these will help to drip feed the river. So when we have these sort of dry periods that we're seeing a lot more of these days, it's these wetlands that will help to keep sort of that drip feeding going on in our rivers to keep them flowing during those dry periods. Wetlands are also fantastic for a whole range of species as well. So the more wetlands we can have in a catchment, obviously the more biodiversity we have. And riparian corridors as well. Very often we see a lot of the land around rivers has been, it's been farmed right up to the riverbanks. But where we have these lovely big areas of buffer strips, they're very good for wildlife, fantastic for pollinators, but they also act to stop any pollution getting into the river from overland. They act as a wildlife corridor, and they're just great for wildlife to move around. And of course, we've lost so many of our flower-rich meadows, our floodplain meadows, our wet meadows. And again, fantastic for pollinators. A catchment which is rich in this sort of habitat can actually, can do so much, not just for wildlife, but for us as well. And great places to spend a bit of time. And this is the detailed river network for the River Way. And I think it just, ignoring the red and green dots, I think it really helps to illustrate how important river catchments are in terms of connectivity. If you think about all of the rivers, the streams, the little brooks, all of the ditch lines, all connected up, it's like a wildlife superhighway. So things can move easily around the county just by sticking to the wetland areas. So if we can look after our river corridors, we can do so much for biodiversity in the county. And I find this picture quite interesting because you can actually see where the River Way squeezes its way through the North Downs just below Guildford there. And the same happens on the Mole over near Dorking as well. But all is not well. You've probably read some of the news articles recently about rivers being in such a poor state. It's very much in the public consciousness now. All of our rivers pretty much are failing. And it has always been a bugbear of ours at the Trust, because no matter how much habitat works we do, if we can't get the water quality right, we're not going to achieve the biodiversity benefits that we're hoping to. So really, focusing on the water quality is key, and it's something we really need to do. There is a lot of pressure at the moment on water companies. The issue with sewage treatment works is that they obviously clean up our wastewater, but they don't strip out all of the nutrients such as phosphate. So these phosphates do get back into our rivers. They act as a fertilizer, and as a result, you see a lack of biodiversity. It reduces oxygen in the channel, but it also encourages competitive plant species, which will outcompete some of our rarer species. So really not good for biodiversity. But on top of this, and this is what's made the news recently, is as climate change begins to bite, we're seeing these more and more intense storms, which get into the, which cause these high flows. Our sewage treatment works can't cope with the amount of water going through them, so they have to surcharge. And where do they surcharge? They surcharge into the river. Now it has to do this because if it couldn't escape, it would back up into everyone's houses and you would have sewage coming back through your own toilet. So this is why these have been put in place. However, the frequency at which these, what they call combined sewage outflows, are running, it's just horrendous. And as a result, we're seeing this happening so much now, so many hours of these sewage treatment works discharging into our rivers. And it's really having an effect. So we need to find solutions to this. And now's a good time to do this because there is a lot of focus on the problem. And it's not just the water industry that's where we're having issues. It's also the way we manage the land around the rivers. Fields like this, which have been left bare in the winter, possibly through no fault of the landowner, because he might not have been able to get onto it. But you can see this is like a mud river running through a field. It jumps onto the roads like this, straight off down into the river. And all of that sediment will sit on those gravels that I mentioned, that will smother all of those river flies. It will carry in things like pesticides, fertilizers, and generally is really not good for the rivers. In Surrey, especially in the Surrey Hills, where we have these very steep-sided roads running down to the river valley, everything jumps out onto those roads, heads down, and as a result, we're seeing all of our gravels being smothered. Well, not all of our gravels, but a lot of our gravels being smothered, and our water quality is suffering as a result. And it's not just water quality, it's water quantity. We're in this kind of famine and feast cycle at the moment. So very often these storms are, winter storms, but also more commonly now, we're getting them in summer as well. And our catchments just aren't equipped to deal with this amount of water. The way we manage our land, our soils aren't able to absorb as much water as they would do naturally. All of the hard surfaces in our towns allow the water to run off. And as a result, the rivers just can't cope. They burst their banks, and we're seeing more and more issues around flooding in our towns. And it's the same the other way as well. We don't store this water. It goes through, it causes problems, but when we need it, it's not there. Our aquifers aren't getting recharged the way that as much as they should be. And more now, we are seeing our headwater streams beginning to dry up. And this is disastrous for the wildlife that lives in those. Not only does a drying up stream or a very low flowing stream cause issues for the species that live in it, it also concentrates any pollutants. There's no oxygen in them. And as a result, we just see a huge die-off. More and more in recent years, we've noticed that some of our wild trout populations, which live in these headwater streams, are struggling. And the Environment Agency has been called out to a number of instances where they've found these trout struggling at the top end of our catchments. And this is a disaster, really, because we have these populations are thousands of years old. They're genetically distinct. So when they're gone, so is that all of those genetics are lost as well. So we really want to start looking at ways, of recharging our wetlands so we can actually keep these streams flowing in these dry periods, which are becoming more and more common. And this trout here, this was taken on a stream which runs down the back of Leith Hill, one of the headwaters of the Cranley Waters. And these guys had to be moved into a deeper area because they were struggling. Another issue, and I'm sorry, this is a depressing bit. I promise it does get less depressing. I'm just kind of showing you some of the things that we're facing. We like to tidy up our rivers, and in the past, in our towns, we've tucked our rivers neatly out the way, where they're not causing an issue to our infrastructure. But when you do this to a river, there's nothing going on there. It's lost all of its natural processes. There's no meanders, there's no deep areas, there's no shallow areas. All of the silt drops out during low flows. It hasn't got any vegetation in it. Absolutely useless for biodiversity. People love rivers as well. To be able to restore rivers in towns, it really is an attractive option for a lot of towns now, rather than just putting them out of the way, putting them underground, etc. And we've done the same in our countryside as well. If you're out walking in the fields and you see a stream, very often they will be tidied up to the edge of the field to make farming, sort of the management of the field, a lot easier. And this happened, this has been happening for hundreds of years, but they drain the land into these, what I'd call more of a ditch. They lack all of those natural processes I mentioned to really support the biodiversity that they originally would. And they begin to erode because they're straight during high flows. They erode down into their bed, and you get these really sunken channels, which run very fast during wet weather, but in dry weather, they're just a silty mess. So we see a lot of that around the county as well. And of course, we've done a huge amount of clearance of habitats around our river corridors. So just leaving them really exposed to any runoff from the land, and obviously taking away all that wildlife habitat as well. Another issue we have is with barriers in the river. So this could be anything from a sluice gate to a weir. It could be anything similar to these lock gates here. And the issue with rivers is connectivity is key because we have migratory fish species, we have trout, we have salmon, we have eels, which need to get into river headwaters to spawn. But we've got so many of these barriers on our rivers, they just don't have a chance of getting up from the sea, up the River Thames, into say the Wey or the Mole catchments. They hit these barriers and they can't go any further. As a result, we see, you know, a depletion of populations in the headwaters. But at the same time, the migratory fish species do bring a huge amount of nutrients up into headwaters as well. So really what we see these days is a real shadow of its former self, of what those streams can support. And I think it's, you know, this has been, we've got a real legacy of milling in Surrey as well. So we've got all of these old redundant structures, many of which are listed now, which are actually stopping the fish getting up into the headwaters. And just to show you the extent of this problem, if you see the River Thames at the top right-hand corner of the screen, it kind of shows you all of the barriers all the way up. And it's really the tributaries where these fish will want to come in to spawn. And you can see one of the tributaries I'm currently working on, the Tillingbourne, you can see the amount of barriers on that stream. This was very famous for its gunpowder works along there. And it's had mills going back to the doomsday times and possibly before. So it's been modified for over 1,000 years, but if we can get passage from the Thames up to the Tillingbourne, you know, we can do so much for our fish species. And we also have issues with invasive species as well across our catchments. Some of the more common are the things like Himalayan balsam, Japanese knotweed, you know, which begin to invade our riverbanks, reducing the botanical diversity of them. But some of the lesser thought about are things like this. This is a demon shrimp, and it is tiny, so don't worry. It's you know, it's not going to bite your feet if you're paddling around in the river. But this turned up in one of my riverfly volunteers' samples just outside Godalming. This is the demon shrimp, and he's very voracious. So he or she very voracious. They will actually predate other shrimp and other riverflies. And we're starting to see a lot more of these invasive species moving in, which will completely alter the dynamics of those riverfly populations. So we do have quite obviously a lot of issues to think about. And we've also lost some of our keystone species. In Surrey, water vole are now classed as functionally extinct. We believe there's no functional populations remaining after many surveys by our volunteers. We get the odd otter sighting within Surrey sort of moving through, but they're very tentatively returning to these parts. And the chap at the bottom, the beaver, he's obviously been out of the picture in this county for well over 400 years, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later. So all is not lost. I always depress everyone at the beginning, but there's some really good stuff that is happening across our rivers. So partnership working. Surrey Wildlife Trust hosts 2 river catchment partnerships. This is the Wey Landscape Partnership and the River Mole Catchment Partnership. Now, these were formed under the catchment-based approach, and every river catchment across the country has a catchment partnership, and this brings together the Environment Agency, organisations like Surrey Wildlife Trust, local authorities, water companies, and anyone with a general interest, from fishing clubs, canoe clubs, just to individuals who have been doing work on rivers, etc. Now, the partnerships work to really come up with plans to restore the rivers, guided by the Environment Agency about what the biggest problems are. And they work to sort of share resources, work together to actually put those measures into place to get our rivers back to something that is of good ecological status. So by good ecological status, we mean it supports good fish populations, invertebrate populations. We find the diversity of aquatic plants that we expect. And nutrients such as phosphate and nitrates are at good levels, and chemical pollutants as well are not picked up in the river as well. So across the country, since 2012, all of these catchment partnerships have been working hard to get rivers up into a good status. And as I mentioned, we mostly focus on the Wey and the River Mole catchments. However, we do a little bit of work on the River Eden in the east of the county as well. So beginning in 2013, at the when the partnership really kicked off, we realised there's a need to understand our rivers better. So we launched the River Search project, which many of you have been involved with, which gave volunteers a method for mapping our rivers and mapping habitat across our rivers, mapping issues such as those that I've just spoken about, and also picking up wildlife recordings as well. Over that time, we've actually we've trained about 190 River Search volunteers altogether, and we've mapped over 130 kilometres of river over the Wey and Mole catchment. So we've now got this fantastic database of what's going on across all of these different areas, and it's been really useful for helping us to pinpoint and prioritise where we will work or where we will likely work in future. And it's through the hard work of our volunteers that we're able to get this data, which is absolutely invaluable. If you think about the cost of hiring a consultant to go out and map that much river, it just wouldn't be feasible. We've also, we carry out this riverfly monitoring with the Riverfly Partnership, and this is a nationwide methodology where volunteers carry out kick samples in the river to look at the fly life on the riverbed. We've trained a total of 97 volunteers, carried out over 600 surveys across 92 different sites. So we've got a real good idea of not only what the current populations of riverflies are like and how they're doing, but also how how it compares to in the past. And huge database once again of results that we can refer back to. And these are the species we're looking for: mayflies, caddisflies, and stoneflies, and freshwater shrimp as well. These are all pollution sensitive species. So if you're monitoring and your fly life suddenly takes a nosedive, you know that there's an issue. And it's been very useful for us pinpointing pollution issues and getting something done about them. And we've got groups both on the River Mole and the River Wey who have worked for years bringing this data in and have actually got on top of pollution issues thanks to their work. And the next bit is restoration. So that's us going out into the river, that actually delivering tasks to restore rivers that aren't doing so well. Our River Search volunteers have been the backbone of our workforce, who we were able to call upon to come out and help us to restore rivers. As a result, over the last 7 years, we've restored 5 kilometres of river. And these are sort of smaller piecemeal projects, things like putting, narrowing channels to increase flows to scrape silt off the gravels, creating fish habitat, fish fry refuge habitat, all of those sort of things which help to begin to restore rivers. So a real success there. And some of the projects that we're currently working on, some of the big ones, I'm not going to cover them all, but I'll go through a few of what we're working on at the moment. The Tillingbourne catchment, this is the one where I mentioned all of the barriers are through the legacy of old mills. And this falls within our biodiversity opportunity area, which runs between sort of Guildford and Red Hill. Now we have, if you think of Leith Hill in the, sort of in the middle there, just to the west of Dorking, this is where a lot of our headwater streams are born. We have streams running off to Cranley, the Tillingbourne, which runs off to Guildford. We have the Pitbrook, which runs off to Dorking. So between Guildford and Leith Hill, we're working on the Tillingbourne to restore that, and then between Leith Hill and Dorking, we're working on the Pip. And it's almost like a really important wildlife corridor. If we can get this, if we can get this right, it allows species to move easily across the county through a relatively quiet area, rather than where we have lots of busy roads. It's a much more sparsely populated area. So this is one of our focus areas. And the project we're currently working on is at Shalford Mill. This this mill is a barrier to all fish moving up from the River Wey, and they get to here and they can't go any further. Sad thing is, upstream of this, there is 3 kilometers of habitat for them and really good spawning habitat up there. So if we could get sea trout to be able to get past this barrier, we could really boost populations upstream. So we currently we were successful in receiving some European funding to work up the designs for this project, and we're currently designing a fish pass which can get around this mill and get the fish up into those headwaters. At the same time as this, there is the Environment Agency is doing some restoration works to a lot of the flood structures downstream. So within the next 5 years, there is likely to be free passage between the River Thames and the Tillingbourne. And we just want to be ready so that when fish do arrive at the Tillingbourne, they can actually get upstream and up into there and start spawning as well. So that's one of the big ones that's been keeping me busy for a while. And the Tillingbourne also suffers very badly with diffuse pollution. These very steep-sided roads, everything jumps out onto them. We can see here, this is a ploughed field sort of behind the picture, and everything runs down straight into the river. As a result, the Tillingbourne is failing for fish because the sediments are all sitting on the gravels in the stream and they smother any fish eggs. Plus, lots of the fish can't get up there. So we've been running a project to isolate where these issues are, work with landowners, and we'll be looking ahead in the coming years to put in things in place to actually stop these diffuse inputs from land getting into our river. The Pitbrook further downstream, we've been carrying out a project there to restore over wide, pretty boring channels where not much has been going on. And over a number of years, we've been putting enhancements in place. And you can see these are what we call brushwood bundles, or faggots as they're known. And we put these in place. You can see what we're trying to achieve here is sort of narrow that channel, increase those flows, but also create these marginal berms where we get a lot of those marginal plants growing up. And you can see the results, just, a completely different river. We had some good aquatic marginal plants upstream, so there was a good seed source there. None of this has been planted. This is all self-sown itself. And straight away, the river fly populations, when we did them immediately after, picked up. We've got a lot more in-stream aquatic vegetation. We've got some cracking marginal areas. We've got wet areas in there. That would be good for amphibians. Great for pollinators as well. So just through a small volunteer task, you can really achieve quite a lot. Further downstream on the mole, we have the Rye Brook, which starts in around Epsom and runs through Ashstead into Leatherhead. And there's some really strong groups along here. We've got the Friends of Teasle Wood, we've got the Friends of Ashstead Rye Meadows, we've got the Lower Mole Countryside Partnership, and they've all been working with underneath the banner of the Mole Partnership to reconnect the river to its floodplain, create these shelves here where marginal plants can get going, and really improve things for biodiversity, fish, invertebrates, etc. And more recently, just downstream from Rye Meadows, last October, we reprofiled all the banks. This river was completely hidden under lots of scrub. The banks were quite high, so we've regraded all of the banks here. And we've also added this wetland in. Looks a bit stark at the moment, but give this a year and this will be sort of a green oasis. And it's wetlands like this, this only fills up when the Rye Brook is running very high. So this will help to store floodwaters, but it's also going to be a great opportunity for wetland wildlife as well. And I would love to see more features like this, because not only do they help to take pressure off our towns downstream, they're also cracking stepping stones for species moving through the catchment. And you can see here the bottom end of that and how it reconnects up to the river there. So some good refuge areas for fish in there as well. And on the Rye Brook, there's been sampling, riverfly sampling. We've been doing this mass water sampling for years, and it's really helped us to understand the state of the river. And as a result, a number of volunteers I can see here today were able to prove that one particular sewage, storm outfall was affecting 1 kilometre of the Rye Brook, having an effect on that. And with that evidence, we were able to take that to the water company and to some of the other players and say, this is what this is doing. When you have the evidence, this is when you can actually put pressure on to make change. So some really good work has happened over on that region. And I do apologise to those of you on this call who have been involved in other projects as well. I just couldn't cover them all today. So our vision going forward. Now, we've always worked this living landscapes vision, and really what we're looking to do is create a catchment that works not just for wildlife, but for people as well. We want to reconnect people to nature. We want farmers to be able to, farm businesses to be able to stay profitable whilst putting in measures for biodiversity. And we want to protect our towns from flooding. We want to work towards reducing the effects of climate change. We want to sequester carbon in across our catchments as well. And of course, improve the connectivity, the landscapes. This has been the plan all along. And we're never going to get back to something like this. I mean, we're never going to go back to a completely natural river catchment. It's just not realistic. But there's a lot we can do to start getting towards something that works for both people and wildlife. One example is degraded soils. The way we farm has led to a huge amount of soil erosion, but we also see a lot of compacted soils, not very much carbon stored in soils. A lot of it's been lost. We're kind of left with these subsoils which are intensively farmed. So really protecting our soils is one of the key areas we should start. Getting a lot of biodiversity into the soils, moving organic matter around. Carbon-rich soils are very good at storing water. So when it rains, water doesn't just run off as it would do in the left of this picture. It's able to absorb into that soil. It's able to recharge our aquifers, which will feed our rivers during drier periods. But it obviously supports a lot more life, a lot more invertebrate life in them as well. So getting on top of the soil issue is not only good for biodiversity, but can be good for farmers as well, because they need less inputs onto their crops, such as pesticides, fertilizers, etc. And really looking after this biome, so to speak, is going to be one of our priorities moving forward. And it's only, and working with farmers so they're not penalised for farming, in this way. Hedgerows, linear features such as hedgerows. We've got the hedgerow project at the moment, and not only fantastic wildlife corridors, but they're very good at helping water to infiltrate into the ground. They're very good at breaking up overland flow. So not only as wildlife corridors, but also to help protect us from flooding. They're very good at picking up sediment running over land as well. So where we can put hedgerows in, working with our hedgerow project, if a well-designed plan could actually work to reduce those diffuse pollution inputs, as well as be beneficial for wildlife. And very similar things like buffer strips planted in the right areas, reducing overland runoff getting into the rivers, creating a wildlife corridor along the edge, helping to sequester carbon, helping to slow the flow down. These sort of measures are fantastic. Leaky dams as well, where when the river flows, the river's left to its own during normal flows, but during high flows, these structures can push water out sideways, so reconnecting the floodplain. That's a benefit to wetland habitats on the floodplain. It's a benefit to the towns downstream. And it's also, there's a trial project currently going on the top of the Pitbrook in Leith Hill, being run by the Forestry Commission, where they've put a lot of these in place, and they've currently got a PhD student who's working on that at the moment to see how effective those measures have been. So lots of little things like this will be important going forward. And looking at low-grade farmland, are there areas that aren't very profitable to farm, where farmers could actually make money from investment? There's going to be a huge amount of investment coming up from businesses wanting the green credentials. Everyone's going to be jumping on that bandwagon. So, working with farmers to prepare plans so we know those areas that would benefit from, from some of the measures to sequester carbon or to hold back floodwaters will be very important. And of course, restoration of priority habitat. Restoring priority habitat, such as floodplain meadows, reed beds, older carr, wet woodland, very important for what we want to do. The species associated with these types of habitat obviously need them, so it's great for biodiversity, but these are also very good at absorbing those pressures from climate change, such as the floodwaters, etc. So it can be a win-win if we do it right. And of course, monitoring. One of my bugbears is we've had such a great monitoring effort from our volunteers who have helped to pick up pollution issues, but we're still seeing these releases from the water industry causing absolute havoc across our rivers. And I realise it's very disheartening for volunteers sometimes seeing their sites slowly degrade, the river fly populations get less and less. So we really want to do an audit of the state of Surrey's river flies. We want to know, a more intensive 1-year project to actually cover as many spots as possible every month and be able to take that evidence, similar to what was done on the Rye Brook, but for both the Wey and the Mole, to take that evidence and say, look, this is what's happening here and this is what the likely problem is. I think this will be very powerful. And this is something we'll be looking at putting together soon. And it's not just about out in the countryside, it's about the towns as well. In a town, where we've tidied the river away, it's not much of a feature, but this is in Midsummer Norton. I can't take credit for this one, but fantastic, absolutely changed the character of that town completely. And it'd be great to be able to work with local authorities, local communities to put measures like this in place so we can actually get wildlife back into the town, but also create somewhere that's nice for people to, to hang out and enjoy watching wildlife. I'm sure we'd all agree that that is a great improvement on what was there previously. And of course, there's stuff everyone can do at home, taking, the more water we take from our taps, the more pressure we put on our groundwater, and the more pressure we put on our groundwater, the less there is for our rivers and our wetlands. So really getting things in place like water butts to water your garden from, getting these discounted from water companies, bog gardens, great for biodiversity, and, can store rainwater in your garden, help it to infiltrate back into the ground. And of course, thinking about what we're doing at home, getting the kids to turn the tap off when they're brushing their teeth, doing more full washes with your washing machine and shorter showers. It's all really important because I think because water is so cheap, we don't really think about it enough, and a lot of us aren't metered. So we really need to understand that, the water we are using is having an impact. And as the Southeast gets more and more populated, it's only going to get worse. So we can all play our part here. So just really to round up, I would like, I think, well, in terms of species recovery, obviously we've lost a lot of these species, but over the next decade, we would like to see the return of some of these iconic species. So water vole, we have a hunch that water vole may be present in the headwaters of the River Wey around the Frensham area. So if this is the case, we need to do everything we can to protect those. There's also opportunities to do reintroduction projects elsewhere, and there's a lot more talk of this now, of getting the correct officer in place to be able to deliver one of those projects across Surrey, and then start thinking strategically about how they might move out from there. So we'll be looking at projects such as reintroductions. We won't be reintroducing otters, but we can think about otters when we're restoring rivers. You know, if we're restoring rivers, there's enough fish for them, or creating habitats such as otter holes, so they've got somewhere to lie up as well. And beavers are pretty much the superheroes of the river. They're a keystone species, they're an ecosystem engineer. The work that they do is incredible, and they can re-wet uplands, they have benefits for the wetted areas they create, have benefits for invertebrates, for amphibians, for birds, for bats. They help to store floodwaters, they help to clean water, they help to create habitat downstream. The list goes on. If I could be reincarnated, it'd probably be as a beaver, and I'd do a huge amount more work than I could possibly ever do in a lifetime as a wetlands officer. They are absolutely fantastic. Not suited to everywhere, agreeably, but they have been allowed to stay in Devon now, where they've been doing the trial there. And there is a lot of management plans coming out of Devon now for how beaver reintroduction can be managed. So in the right places, in some of those more sparsely populated areas, there could be opportunities in future to actually get these guys back into Surrey and doing some good work for us, helping protect our towns from flooding, etc. So that is something that is also on the back burner at the moment. And really, you know, species such as trout, these priority species for our river catchments, you know, when we have good populations of these, it's telling us that our rivers are in good nick. So if we can really, you know, if we can begin to monitor our fish populations much more closely, which we plan to do through electrofishing and maybe training our staff up to be able to really get out there and monitor our restoration projects, these guys will be able to tell us how effective the work we're doing is. And also want to see some of the lesser known species. We turn up in riverfly samples from time to time, like the brook lamprey. You know, it'd be great to know a little bit more about these populations. How are they faring? You know, really start getting some effort into understanding some of the lesser known species as well. And of course, we've done eel monitoring on the river mole. And there's a huge amount of things we could do quite easily. For example, kingfishers, relatively common, but wouldn't it be great to know where they are? Can we put an app together so we can get, you know, Surrey out there looking for kingfishers, telling us where the gaps are, and then helping us to decide why look into why there are gaps there. So some really interesting citizen science projects which could come to fruition in the coming years, to really beginning to look at priority species, priority habitats, and find out what's there and help to guide us in what we can do next. That's the Scottish beaver. I don't know what he's doing in there, so that's a bit of an accident. So that's about it from me. I guess my final thought would be as we leave Europe, we are going through seismic change. We're obviously we're leaving the common agricultural policy, and we've got the new environmental land management schemes, which farmers will be applying for to get subsidies for farming. Previously, farmers received subsidies just for owning land in the basic farm payment scheme, but now they will only receive subsidies for actually providing public goods. So it's public money for public goods. So a farmer who works with other farmers in the area to do things for carbon sequestration, flood management, and biodiversity is able to get a lot more funding than someone who just did the basic. So as a trust, it's really important that we align our plans with landowners, and it's likely landowners will, speaking to the farmers that I work with, they will be looking to work up plans with us. So for the first time, you know, ever, we'll have the ability to work a lot closer with farmers. So for example, we could look at a stretch of river, say on the Tillingbourne or the Pitbrook, we could see what the issues are, have a look at the issues, what can we do on the farm to reduce those, and where can we restore priority habitats maybe that the farmer can then claim on. There's a lot of money coming from the business sector with the carbon credits type things. There'll be ways to bring money into the farms from that as well. And the whole natural capital thing is about to take off. So we are standing on the precipice of being able to deliver what we do at the landscape scale, which is what we've been trying to do, but it's so piecemeal what we've done so far. And we really want this holistic approach to managing our river corridors. And I really think now we have a fantastic opportunity to do that, and involving local communities, keeping our volunteers going and keeping our volunteers happy and trained and able to get interested in more things and supporting them will be key going forward. So the futures, I would say, is a lot brighter. And despite all of the issues we have made some really good progress. And I'm looking forward to working with many of you in the decade to come to make some more. So I think that's about it from me, and I'll hand over back to Sophie.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Glenn. That's absolutely fascinating. And it's so lovely to see a little clap as well. Thank you so much. We have some great questions that are coming in already. So I'm just going to start reading out a few. Wow, they're coming in thick and fast. Right. We had lovely comments from Elizabeth. And you, Elizabeth, you asked about beavers being reintroduced to Surrey. I don't know if there's anything more you'd like to say about that, Glenn. I know you covered that briefly at the end of your presentation. And she also commented that we need you as a human. You're quite handy to us as a human, Glenn, so don't consider any other alternatives. And she also said the river mapping, wonderful achievement, and that has been mentioned by a few other people as well. So I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to add to the question about beavers being introduced to Surrey?
Yeah. So, well, funnily enough, the National Trust are releasing beavers on their Blackdown Reserve, which is on the headwaters of the South Way. They were due to go in May last year, but obviously with the disruptions we've had, it didn't happen. But they may be there already, or they may be going in soon. There's a wetland corridor there on one of these headwaters with lots of bits of pockets of woodland. So they're kind of doing a trial down there to see the effect that the beavers have. So they are back in Surrey, thanks to one of our partners. And there might be opportunities to get down and see them at some point. I think they're a little bit nervous because the roads are so tiny around there, very narrow roads, that if there's a rush of visitors to see the beavers, they might find they get in trouble with the local property owners. So they're keeping it slightly on the down low, but that is something that we'll be watching very keenly. And I'm always looking out for potential landowners who might be interested in, looking at a large area of wetland areas to introduce beavers. And they'll be able to claim the farm subsidies on having beavers on their land as well. So it will be quite a lot more attractive for a landowner to do it. So that's kind of where we're at. But I don't have any sites yet. I was thinking it'd be great to have them on the military ranges over in Ash, but that's not really got anywhere. So, but we'll look for other viable options.
And we know you will. Wonderful. A few more questions. Where does CERT fit in with the catchment partnerships?
So
that's from Keith.
Yeah, so I should have mentioned this previously. So I said we host the Way Landscape Partnership and the Mole Catchment Partnership. We actually co-host the Mole Catchment Partnership with the CERT, who is the South East Rivers Trust. The Rivers Trust movement do manage a huge amount of catchment partnerships across the country, but we work closely with CERT on the Mole Catchment Partnership. They're more technical experts than us, so they're very good at actually getting the guys in there to do things like weir removal, or some of the big engineering projects. So they're a really good host to work with. We have through Morag Sterling, who was our CERT representative for the mole. She was very good at sort of pushing the agenda of the rivers forward. Sadly, she's moved on now, but yes, certainly working with CERT is something we'll be doing in years to come as well, and trying to, you know, divvy out the work. So it was thanks to CERT. CERT did all of the designs and the flood consents for the Kestrel field works for us. So yeah, they're a fantastic partner to work with.
Can I pop in and add a supplementary to that then? Because
absolutely, Keith, go for it.
I noticed that CERT had recently got underway a project for the Chambermead, the Hogs Mill, which isn't far from us, but it's not the Wey or the Mole, because the Hogs Mill goes into the Kingston at Thames. But again, it sounds like another really interesting urban project to improved headwaters, and I just wondered if we've been involved in that one.
No, I must admit, despite the Hogs Mill having, you know, being in a lot of it being in Surrey, there's only so much we've been able to do. So CERT are the sole catchment hosts on that one. We haven't had an awful lot to do with that. They're real experts at the urban river regeneration type stuff. So, you know, for example, in some of our towns in Surrey, they'd be really good guys to work with. But no, unfortunately, the Hogs Mill has been one of the oldest river catchments, and they've done a huge amount. But yeah, our involvement has been pretty much zero. I think Jim was involved a bit previously, but yeah, we're just sort of with them on the mole.
Okay, I suspect they need river search and river fly volunteers as well.
Yeah, they do have their own. Monitoring program in place. I think they have pollution monitors there, which is a lot more required a lot more on the sort of urban rivers. So,
thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Keith. Great question. Right, we have another question on river mapping. Libby asked, we've mapped 130 kilometres of river. Any idea what percentage that is, just out of interest?
Well, I haven't got a clue, because I believe the way from the south source to Weybridge is about 80 something kilometres. But when you work out every little stream and then every little stream on the mole, you're talking a lot. It's at least, I don't know, 132 kilometres. No, I think it's, yeah, I'm sure we could work that out actually on GIS. So yeah, that'd be interesting to do. But yeah, we've mapped most of the important bits.
Brilliant work. Right, we've got another question from Keith actually. Do we have techniques to extract silt from our rivers and return it to the land, e.g. creating wetland areas and stream enhancement?
Well, I mean, getting silt out of the rivers, one project we did in Alton was to put the berms in place and then backfill with the silt, and that provided the bed for the plants to get going on. So if you've got a really silty stream, you can do it like that, sort of move it from one bit to the other, keeping it on site. But it's difficult really in terms of moving things around. The problem with rivers is a lot of silt. If you're downstream of a town, it's going to be full of heavy metals. It's going to have quite a lot of nasties in it, and you can't really move it around unless if it goes on land, you might have to test it. You don't really want to be growing crops and stuff like that. So there's been issues there in the past when we've had to dredge out ponds and things, and wondering that have been online with the river and wondering where to put the silt. And it's the point there is as well, obviously all wetlands going forward will need some sort of management, as the Kestrel field one will do. So you do have to think about where that sediment will go. Otherwise your ponds will just succeed into a terrestrial landscape in the end. So yeah, short answer is I'm not so sure. in terms of light desilting, we basically get in the river with a pressure washer, and we blast the gravels out, and that's really effective at you know, it completely washes away your riverfly population, but it can recover in like 48 hours, and then the gravels are really clean, well oxygenated. So that's another method. If you've got areas, I mean, gravels can look clean sometimes, but when you actually look, I'm sure you know, Keith, when you're kicking them up, the amount of sediment that comes out of them is, it's all sitting in there. So one thing I think will be a good bit of kit for us to have is a small boat that you can pull along with a pressure washer on it, to start doing some areas of gravel clearing as well.
Brilliant. Right, next question is, how do ponds fit in with SWT's wetland strategy? That's a brilliant question.
Yeah, well, I think ponds, pond creation, in terms of stepping stone habitat, really important in terms of, you know, the still water species as well. I think there's going to be a great opportunity to put ponds into our floodplains to not only necessarily connected to the river, they don't have to necessarily be connected to the river, but just putting them in place as buffers, so they could help to reduce runoff from land, you know, flood water storage ponds as well. I see that being a really big part of what we do. Not, you know, our focus won't always be on the channel, it'll actually be on the flood, it's going to be on the floodplain as well. As many ponds as possible. When we're building plans with landowners, looking at that, one of the things that we will be putting forward is to say, can you put ponds here? Strategically placed ponds as well, which you know, can really help to protect us from flooding, will look very attractive to funders. And the other thing is, there's a lot of these nature for climate funds and a lot of the natural capital payments will likely be able to support things, wetland creation, because wetlands actually, you know, everyone talks about trees, but wetlands really store carbon. You know, they can store huge amounts of carbon. So putting ponds in as carbon sinks, so to speak, is likely to attract funding, and understanding, you know, what ponds we want and where, and getting a better idea of the state of ponds generally across the river catchment could help us prioritise where they go as well. So yeah, I see wetlands really opening out to include a lot of ponds. We're trialling one at the moment actually on a farm that we manage. Sort of clear, it's been forgotten about, grown over. It's just a quagmire now, so we're actually dredging it out. So that's going to be an interesting one to see how it recovers from that. And there's been so much pond restoration nationally. There really is some good case studies that we could follow as well. So yeah, a very healthy river and a floodplain full of ponds is kind of the vision, I think.
Brilliant. Right, just in terms of a time check, we are sort of at 11 o'clock when we were due to finish today's coffee morning, but I have loads more questions. So if you have to rush off, then we won't be insulted, but please do stay if you can, and we will try and answer as many questions as possible. Right, I'm going to go to Emma Rothwell next, who has got a question on behalf of her dad.
Yes, Glenn, I'm hoping you'll be able to answer this. It's we'll see how you go. So my dad would like to know whether urban streams and brooks are a source of gross pollution with our uncaring populations. How can you plan any downstream work without attending to those urban pollution problems? Yeah,
it's a really good point. Obviously, the further down, in an ideal world, you'd work from the top of the catchment down, because, you know, the work you do at the bottom is always going to be affected by what goes on at the top. The issue we have in urban streams is that the storm drains, so if you think about all the properties that drain into storm drains, what often happens there is someone connects a dishwasher, or sometimes even toilets, a builder connects up toilets or something to these storm drains, and you can have storm drains which then, as they get into the river, you know, release all the nasty straight in, and it's an intermittent problem. So on the Rye Brook, the storm drain there at Broadhurst Road, it's something like, Keith might want to correct me, it's something like 1,000 properties eventually get into that drain, the catchment area. So you have what I think there was an issue with a takeaway. So all the gunk and leftover meat and everything was going into the plug hole, and then it was going down into the storm drain rather than into the grey water sewer. And then obviously really bad for the brook. And they take, if you imagine 1,000 properties going into one storm drain, it's incredibly hard to find out which property is doing it, which is what the water companies struggle with. And you sort one out, and then someone else decides to put a new dishwasher in, and then you have the same problem again. So the urban pollution is very much focused on these, what we call point source discharges at outfalls, where, you know, one building after another. And that's where you can look at things like, if there's room, putting in small treatment wetlands. So they run through a wetland area first before they get into the river. So there's some kind of purification work that's gone on before it gets into the river. And this is where monitoring is really important. Often this will go unnoticed, but if you do monitor river flies, phosphates, etc., you can pick these pollution incidents up. And that's what our volunteers have been doing. And if you pick them up, then you've got the evidence to actually share with the water company and say, put the pressure on to actually get them to do something about it. But in terms of working strategically, you can't just, you have to work where the opportunities are. And sadly, we have to accept that we might put some cracking habitat in, and we're always going to have issues coming from upstream. But the key is to locate where those issues are first, and then begin to tackle them as we go.
Wonderful, great question. Goodness me. Right, we have lots and lots of questions. Libby, sorry, I missed your question earlier about the Environment Agency a year ago raised hope that about opportunities for natural flood management, e.g. keeping more water in the upper reaches of the catchment. Do we have any updates on that?
Well, there's there's a flood resilience innovation fund that's out at the moment, which county councils can tap into. So we've actually just put in for a Pathfinder project on our heathlands. Heathlands have a lot of the headwater streams on them, and if what we would like to do is a lot of the heathlands have been drained at the expense of mire habitat. Mire is like a really wet, almost boggy habitat, which has its own range of species. So by restoring mire, by blocking up these ditches, not only can we get the species back, but we can actually help to attenuate flooding. So we have put a project forward for that. And in terms of other headwaters, the Environment Agency itself is currently clambering to find where the opportunities are. So if you do know of anyone, it's worth feeding them through to our catchment coordinator, who is now Jeanette Worcester on the way, because they are looking for all of these headwater opportunities, particularly in Cranley area at the moment, but elsewhere it's always worth looking. And if the EA can't fund it, there's always obviously the chance in future that another organisation will fund it if they're there. So
brilliant. Right, and we have loads more questions.
I should probably speed up a bit.
Sorry. So let's set a timer on. Climate change will lead to more prolonged and heavy rain and more periods of drought. Can we make river resilient for 10 to 20 years time and not just for tomorrow?
Yeah, I think so resilience, again, that's working up with these farm plans with our landowners is going to be key. And we're not just looking at changing the way they farm, because obviously they can change back again and then we haven't solved the problem. But this will be actually putting things in place, such as buffer strips, such as, you know, extending woodlands, extending priority habitats. That will really be long-term solutions to the problem. I mean, the new Environmental Land Management Scheme is the scheme which is built into the Environment Bill now. So with this going forward, it's going to take some time to find our feet and work these plans with farmers, but these plans will completely build resilience into our river catchments. And there'd be no reason once their plans have started for farmers to pull out of them unless they had got a better offer. So it's our job to make sure that we provide the best offer for them, really.
Brilliant. Right, I had a couple of questions from Bernie. Is it possible that more trout ladders will be introduced, such as the new one at Walshingham Gate? Next question is, same from Bernie. Is there anything we can do to help reduce the invasive weed on the way? And should we feed through kingfisher sightings to SWT?
Yeah, so yeah, there will be more fish ladders. The work the EA is doing on the restoring the old mill gates, they have to put in fish ladders now, so we can expect to see those on a lot more of the gates down there at Ham Oil Mills, where, as you mentioned, Walsham, where I forget the names of the other ones. We're looking at one at Burtham Court Farm as well. There'll be one in Guildford as well. So yes, there is over the next 5 to 10 years, we expect to see a lot of changes there. Invasive weeds, this has to really be driven at a local level. Again, the issue of upstream weeds, seeds coming downstream is always going to be a problem. I'd say where we have had success with things like Himalayan balsam is where the groups have got together, such as Caroline Cardew-Smith's group in Leatherhead, who works Friends of the River Mole, who just hammer it every year. And when I started this job, it was absolutely overflowing with balsam. They've really done a cracking job to get on top, and they tackle new areas, new little islands each year, and they've really got under control. But it needs that ongoing management to do it, which can't come from a single organisation. It has to be done locally. So getting a local group together to tackle it is the way to do that. And obviously Surrey Wildlife Trust will support where possible with, advice and, well, wherever we could. So in terms of kingfishers, always send your kingfisher sightings through to our Biological Records Centre. At some point, we'll try and get an app together. Well, we will get an app together, and we'll get that out so you can record any new sightings on that, which will then go to our records centre as well.
Brilliant. Glenn, it mentioned briefly rivers and town centres. Are links being made with town centre planners as they are looking at non-shopping attractions to save their centres?
Yeah, I think early days that where I live in Alton, I've been looking at some potential projects like that. I can see Jenny nodding there. That is, we've got lots of opportunities there to do stuff, and we are in touch with the town council. So where there are opportunities like that, it's especially with things like net gain coming through as well. Obviously, working in town centres is generally more expensive. So, the town councils aren't necessarily going to be able to put those things into place. But yeah, if you in your local town think there's something that can be done, it's really worth getting it past your councillor, because they might actually be interested. If not, get it through to one of the catchment partnerships. You can find our website where you can contact us directly, and we could put you in touch with the right person for that area. But yeah, you should always think, if there is an opportunity, definitely get it on the, into the consciousness of the local council, because you might find that they're actually very sympathetic to it, and it's really good for the town as well. So
absolutely, that's probably actually one questions I can answer as well, which surprises myself. We are actually working very closely with Surrey Nature Partnership, and we are holding a conference for town and county planners in about a month's time. So that will be all about sort of upskilling them on biodiversity net gain, what they can sort of think about to increase biodiversity in their town and outside as well. So there's a lot of work going on within other teams as well to to inspire planners to think about biodiversity and nature as well, which is very, very exciting. So moving on to the next question, there's a couple about water companies actually. So has Surrey Wildlife Trust worked alongside or planned any potential projects with Surrey's water companies to tackle the issue of CSOs? And there was another question relating to that, so I'll ask that at the same time. Are you working with any water companies to reduce abstraction? There you go.
Yeah, so being quite candid, I think the water companies, with all the bad press they're receiving at the moment, are really we're seeing a lot more action, whereas previously they were quite, some are better than others, but their involvement on the partnerships, it's not fair to say that actually. Only certain water companies didn't get particularly involved with the partnerships, but we're starting to see real involvement now. I've possibly been to about 10 meetings in the space of 2 weeks with water companies, because they're scrabbling for information on what we know the problems to be. And of course, with all of those river search surveys and all of the work I've done with the volunteers, we've got a fantastic picture of the catchment. So it's called the Water Industry Natural Environment Programme. So we're feeding basically everything we know about wastewater issues and also about some of the bigger issues as well to them, to form part of their future plan. But again, with that, the whole surveying and monitoring thing is one of our best weapons really for getting them moving as well. The other thing would be, as you mentioned, abstraction. Abstraction is it's not something that as a trust we've personally had a huge amount to do with, although June Chatfield of the Northway Trust did get a pumping station shut off in the 90s because it was causing issues to the headwaters of the River Wey, and that did solve the issue. So if there is issues at the catchment where you notice headwater streams drying up, we'd be interested to hear, because that if there is an abstraction point nearby or upstream, that could give us some really useful information. The partnership is hungry for information like this about headwater streams and whether they're drying up or not. So yes, please do send through anything like that, and we can work with it. In other parts of the country, it's particularly bad, and I know some of the chalk streams have been dry for years, and they're really Fergal Sharkey, the Undertones front man, there's some fantastic presentations that he's done. I really encourage you to go and listen to Fergal speak about the problem, because it is quite eye-opening. But yeah, please do report back to us if you know of issues.
Brilliant. Right, clearly we have a couple of questions on getting out there and volunteering. I feel everyone else is paying for not being able to get out there. So basically we want to know sort of what the advice is at the moment on COVID-19 and getting out there and getting some samples and getting back involved.
Yeah, so the issue with river fly monitoring is you need to be there in a pair, just in case a tidal wave comes down the river and washes you away. You need someone there with a rope. So that's why we've had to stop that monitoring. If it is you and someone from your household, that's not a problem. But if it's outside your household, we can't do that at the moment. I'm hoping volunteering wasn't as badly affected during the tiered things. So I'm hoping that when the tiers come back in, we can potentially get you guys out there again, monitoring. I would like to pull everyone together at some point as well to kind of discuss our strategy going forward. But yes, so for the time being, if you can just hold fire, unless you can get out with your partner or someone you live with, yeah, we just got to be super careful. Yeah, that's the best I can offer at the moment.
And I have to unmute myself just as my husband's boiling the tea. I'm so sorry about that. Right, coming to the end of the questions. Right, volunteer days at Manor Farm, Thundry Meadows. Any thoughts on that, Glenn?
That's one for Ross Packman, I believe, or someone from the countryside estate. Manor Farm, you might have heard, is going for the Byfleet flood alleviation scheme. So there's going to be some big works there and some big habitat creation works there coming up in future. So that's something to keep an eye on. But yeah, if you get in touch with either Claire Courtier, the volunteer coordinator, she'd be able to probably give you an idea of when Manor Farm or Thundry tasks are likely to be taking place.
Brilliant. And I think this is the last question. Oh no, another one's just come in. There is much in the press about the aquatic pollution by neonicotinoids. I can't say this word. Someone help me out.
Neonicotinoids.
That's the one. Thank you, Glenn. I knew there'd be something I wouldn't be able to pronounce. In dog flea treatments, are you doing anything about monitoring this?
No, not. I wouldn't know where to begin. I think this would be a university study where they've got the kit that can actually measure this stuff. So if there was an opportunity there to do that, I'm sure we've worked with universities a lot before looking at river fly life. So again, that might be a good thing to get involved with, get some monitoring out with our volunteers and help. So we could certainly suggest it to university. I've stopped defleeing my dog now because he's a poodle, so he loves rivers. So after that all came out, I haven't defleed him because it's the winter. So I'm keeping an eye on him, but he seems all right, to be fair, no fleas. So yeah.
Long may that last, Glenn.
Yeah,
Brilliant. I can't see any more questions at the moment. If anyone would like to sort of raise their hand and ask a question, we'll happily unmute you. Just lots of comments saying, Glenn, thank you so much. Really, really great talk. And actually, while you're here, before I lose you all, we do have another coffee morning next week, which I literally... Hi, Mary, I can see you. I will definitely come to you in a second, my love. We will... the coffee morning next week, I've literally just put online. So if you want to book a place, please go online. It's all about the Sand Martin project at Spines Mere, which is really, really exciting. And I literally can't wait for it. Shame I won't be hosting it, really. I'll have to watch it on record. So do sign up. And Glenn did mention about hedgerows in his talk as well. We have the lovely Katie Fielding talking about hedgerows tomorrow evening. And lots more talks going online. So please do book a place. If you find that they are full, just email events@surreywildlifetrust.org, and then I will extend the number of places, because we're not really limited on Zoom, which is fantastic. So Mary, would you like to ask your question if you can unmute yourself?
Yeah, I noticed that our grandchildren are always leaving the tap running, and I wonder whether there is any good educational material for persuading the general public that in spite of all the water that's falling down, actually use of excess, we need to reduce the amount of water we use. And I think that the general public really isn't aware of that at all.
Well,
Brilliant question.
It just so happens that we've hired an animator who's putting together a kind of a climate change, river biodiversity and water saving animation for us. It's myself and Emma and Lou, Emma Rothwell and Lou from the education team have been working this up. So we've got the package ready. We're just looking for a bit of funding. We ideally want to get it out for Rivers Week this year, which is the end of September. So that will be available. And it's just brilliant what someone as creative as our animator Rowan has done. And we think it's gonna be used. Emma and Lou will be taking it out to the schools. People will be able to run assemblies with it as well. and it's going to be online for anyone to use, so you know you can get the message out. So yeah, one of the really fun sort of project to work on actually, and yeah, we'll hopefully, all being well with the funding, we'll get that out later this year.
Okay, thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you for asking that question, Mary. Sorry, I believe I did miss it. I did see something about it earlier. I just got lost in all the questions. Right, I don't think we've got any more questions. Just one comment from Ian. He said, we shouldn't see any neonics. I swear you're using these words just to trip me up now. In Surrey, because there's no sugar beet grown. I don't know about that. Glenn, can you explain?
We shouldn't see any what, sorry?
Sugar beet grown.
No, what was the first word you said?
Neonics.
Oh, neonics. Oh, sorry.
There we go.
Yeah.
See?
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, because the recent U-turn that the UK government did is, yeah, like you mentioned, particularly for sugar beet. I didn't know that actually about the sugar beet in this county. So yeah, that's good to know. It's our pets, isn't it? That's the issue with the because they're neonicotinoids as well in the flea treatments. So yes.
Brilliant, thank you, and I'm glad you all had a laugh. Right, that looks like it's the end of the questions. So thank you all so much for coming. I know a lot of you are volunteers with us, so thank you so much for your support. Just listening to Glenn's presentation really hits home how vital your work is in all of our sort of efforts to help nature. So I'm going to close the meeting. I look forward to seeing you at future meetings and maybe at the coffee morning next week. Thank you all so much for coming.
It's really nice to see all my volunteers as well. So yeah, great to see you all.
Brilliant. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Glenn.
Thanks, Glenn. Glenn, just a quick one.
Yeah.
I sent you a note in the comments. I don't know if you saw it, but did you know that Mike Coates and that at Farnham are making faggots should you ever need a supply?
Oh, okay. Oh, that's worth knowing.
Yeah, because the volunteers, instead of burning all the birch, they've been cutting the tops and actually making them as faggots.
Right, okay.
So
yeah, I haven't got anything on plan this spring, but that might be they do last a little while, so that might be handy.
yeah,
later.
it might be worth you getting in touch with them anyway.
Yeah.
Register your interest.
Yeah, okay. Mike Coates. Yeah. All right, cheers.